Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no more lies. We'll never know.
I don't know whether it's the best idea or not to sit down here by myself in the basement recording a Pirates podcast after waiting around for almost 3 hours for the water to recede out of the outfield, get squeegeed into wherever it could be, then seeing balls clank off of pretty much everyone's glove. That has become a pattern when Jake Woodford takes the mound for the Pirates. But we're going to go ahead and do it anyway, because down here at Bucs in the Basement, we give you your 30 minutes of Bucs once a week, sometimes twice a week when I do the minor league news and brews. Should be twice this week, but definitely going to be talking some Pirates dropping to 56 and 56. And I don't like to do podcasts that are not evergreen in some ways. I mean, you could recap the game, recap everything that went wrong, but to me, this is more of a cumulative effect of kind of the Pirates season as a whole. There have been some very bright spots. I mean, obviously, Paul Skeens and what he has been doing did not have his best outing his last time out, only going 5 1/3 innings, allowing a couple runs, and not having the type of dominating performance that we would expect from Skeens. I kind of do expect those types of outings from him from time to time. I had talked about this previously, about the way that he pitches. Not every outing, because we've seen adjustments be made for him to get through more innings. When his pitch counts get very high in the beginning of games, especially the one game where he was at like 60 pitches or something like that through 3 innings, saw him become more of a contact pitcher. But when the pitches aren't working the way that he wants them to, location, speed, effectiveness, can get himself into a little bit of trouble, but for the most part has been one of those bright spots. Joey Bart, everybody talking about now, what he's been doing, basically taking a stranglehold on the starting catching position, Yasmani Grandal. The one thing with Yasmani Grandal that I definitely did want to point out is that in his limited play recently, we have been seeing a better player, and I don't know if it's because he's not as tired, he's a little bit more well-rested. That could definitely have something to do with it. But Yasmani Grandal has been hitting the ball a decent amount better, so I can't really complain too much about that, and it seems like this might be a little bit of a complaining show, a little bit of a venting session for myself. I'm not usually up past midnight. I can barely make it on New Year's Eve, but I'm doing it here for you guys and maybe a little bit for myself to kind of just, I really expected more, and I hate to keep going back to, I want to be an evergreen show, but I mean, dropping 2 games that you probably should have won, over this past weekend, dropping a game to not, sweep the Astros, and then kind of coming out here and laying a little bit of a goose egg tonight. But Yasmani Grandal, over his last, and this is like extremely, extremely small sample size, last 20 plate appearances, slashing 300, 364, 550. Even if you take it over his last 30 games, I mean, obviously not great, but 215, 267, 354, not looking too good there. But has been hitting the ball at least a little bit better for a little bit more power, not really striking out as much. Last 43, or check that, 45 plate appearances, only has 3 strikeouts. So if Yasmani Grandal is the backup catcher for the rest of the season, it's not something I'm really going to lose sleep over. As we've talked about on this show many times before, it's only a matter of time probably before Yasmani Grandal gets another one of his injuries. Jason DeLay is who I would call up at this point in time. I would kind of just let Henry Davis sit down there in AAA and mash for a season. I know that it may not do much for the baseball side of the development, just because he's shown before that he can hit the AAA pitching, but more of maybe just kind of like a little bit of a confidence boost to just basically mash some balls, because before he went down to AAA, we were seeing a very frustrated Henry Davis. A lot of emotions with strikeouts, whether it was, the called strikes, if he couldn't catch up with a fastball, taking the bat, hitting it down on the ground. I mean, gripping the baseball bat so tight that, you thought that he was pretty much going to break it in half. So I don't know if you really want him to come up at this point during the season and then put all of that kind of pressure back on him to a degree, just because if he fails again at the plate, which he may do anyway, I just really don't want to see that hit on the confidence. I don't want to see the frustrated, the try-hard Henry Davis again. And Jason DeLay is a fine backup, and he's a guy that, it would make a fine backup moving forward if there would be that decision to ultimately move Henry off of the catching position, more of a DH position. I've seen first base. Don't know how the mobility would work out there. It's not just as easy as saying, okay, when we were in Little League, the tallest kid or sometimes the most unathletic kid would go from catcher to first base. And I'm talking about that from experience because I was that kid. I'm not really making fun of any of those kids. If anything, I'm making fun of myself, and I don't want to turn this into a, debate about Henry Davis's development. It's more about kind of the development as a team under Ben Cherington. And yes, there were some moves that were made during this most recent trade deadline. I thought with most of, Ben Cherington's moves as, general manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates since he's taken over, trades and acquisitions that for the most part, outside of, I kind of look towards like maybe the Josh Bell trade for Will Crow, and Eddie Yean. Eddie Yean still with this, with the club in the system. Will Crow has moved on. Saw some flashes from Will Crow when he was the full-time starter. Thought that we could see some more flashes from him, in a bullpen role. Didn't really work out. But for the most part, Ben Cherington's moves as general manager, kind of in a bubble or in a vacuum, have all been, pretty solid moves. Last week, talking with our guest at Pirate Takes, go give him a follow. It was a good conversation. It was talking about, not really giving up much for De La Cruz. And you're giving up Young Shuk Shim, who has really, I believe, pitched less than 10 professional innings, has been injured for this entire year. Garrett Forrester, a man without a position, I believe drafted as a third baseman, put into a catching position, something he hadn't done for years, put at first base a little bit. So if you're doing that, like in a vacuum, that's kind of, not a bad move. But for anybody that listens to this show, knows that I had Fish on First on to discuss the moves that could be made. Obviously, at that point in time, Jazz Chisholm was, more of the target and, subject to that conversation because of the article that was written. But we did discuss, a Brian De La Cruz that Jim Bowden had brought up. I think he threw Josh Bell in there as well. Made the comparison at that time, and I will still stick to that comparison of Brian De La Cruz being who Ben Cherington hoped that Edward Olivares would be when he traded for him during this past offseason. And for anybody that remembers the Edward Olivares move, what he did last year in a not completely limited role, because he did get 385 plate appearances, hit 12 home runs, slash 263, 317, 452, 769, good for a 106 OPS plus. Above average hitter, and it kind of seems like that, he didn't do that this season. But he also didn't get very consistent playing time. Would be in a couple games, would get hot, seemed to be getting on a roll, then wouldn't be in a few games. But he did almost total 200 plate appearances, just under that at 196 plate appearances this year. 224, 291, 333. Didn't really see all of the power that we were hoping for, but did have, 5 home runs. You double those plate appearances pretty much, like estimated. That's up to 10 home runs. So it kind of would be what he would, have provided last year. Saw the, slugging go down a little bit, the on-base percentage go down a little bit, because he wasn't hitting, there was no triples, not a ton of doubles. So then you go out and you get, Brian De La Cruz. And Brian De La Cruz last year for the Miami Marlins had 472 plate appearances, hit 18 home runs, but actually didn't even hit as well as Edward Olivares as far as the OPS plus. He slashed 242, 285, 407, good for a 692, and an 89 OPS plus. The last time he had a positive and above average OPS plus was back in 2022, when he had about 355 plate appearances, 13 home runs, a 102 OPS plus. So he pretty much is the exact same player as Edward Olivares. He was 25 when he did it. Edward Olivares last year was 27. So, I mean, they're right around the same player. And it just really frustrated me tonight when I was looking at the game and I look up at the screen and I see, Brian De La Cruz with an OPS under 700. And I know that like 700, the OPS pluses change because the average OPS in Major League Baseball changes from year to year. But here at Bucs in the Basement, we have always used, 700. If your OPS is above 700, you can be, a regular player on our baseball team. And I see his OPS below 700, and it kind of almost set me into a rage because, yes, he upgraded the position, which is, if you're putting him in right field, which is where he is best defensively. I mean, he's not great. He's a little bit below average there, but he's not as terrible as he is if you would put him in left field, where I think his defensive run save was somewhere around like -16 as opposed to -1 for his career in right field. And it's better than like kind of Connor Joe has been playing, but you get a guy who comes in here and it's not even that he only has 3 hits in whatever it would be. Like, I think it's 24 plate appearances at the time of this recording for the Pirates. It's because you went out and got a below league average hitter. And that was one of your major acquisitions. And that's not putting like the Isaiah or kind of Falefa, trade, to the side or whatever, because I actually really like that one. It's not that I disliked the Brian De La Cruz trade. It's not one that I would have made. It's one that I kind of talked against before it was made. But like I said, in a vacuum, you can look at it and say, okay, that's not that bad of a trade. But like, what kind of player are you actually getting, especially when you have to look at the holes within your lineup and kind of fill those holes? And to me, the biggest hole that was in the lineup was in center field. And tonight, as I'm recording, it's actually like at this point in time, maybe last night when the play was made, is that because it's this morning when I'm recording, like I said, I'm up late, I'm rambling a little bit, you're getting a little bit of a venting thing here, but you have G1 Bay out there, a man who technically and it just cannot play center field. You've tried to make him a center fielder. He was brought up as a middle infielder, wasn't really great as a middle infielder, showed the athleticism to be able to possibly switch to center field. Always talk about, you get those athletic middle infielders, you have the ability to possibly move them, to an outfield position, but it's not a guarantee. It's not like guys can automatically go out there and know how to read the ball off of the bat because of the spins that they have. I mean, a ball coming to left field will look completely different than a ball coming to center field, to right field. But you look at his natural ability and you can see, okay, we may be able to turn him into a center fielder. And then twice tonight, once on the one coming in, which I don't know how you don't call that an error, and that's one thing that I don't understand in baseball right here. There's going to be a lot of sidebars in this conversation here, guys. 2 things I don't understand is, number one, I don't understand what an error is anymore, and those could be changed to errors. I follow somebody on X or Twitter that is like that updates those. It's like the record updates. So some of these could be changed to errors. To me, in baseball, the ball hits your glove. I saw somebody post that it was like an 83% chance of catching that ball. Anything over 50%, it hits your glove. That's an error. Rowdy Tellez, the one that he kind of sticks his glove up there and closes it, before the ball comes in, and then it like pops off of there and gives a double to Jackson Merrill. That's an error. Did not see any errors on the board from the scorekeepers at PNC Park tonight, but that's neither here nor there. The biggest thing for me right now is your biggest need on this team was a center fielder. and you didn't go out and get a center fielder. And for all the people that are screaming about, Billy Cook being down in the minors, Billy Cook is one of those guys that is being transitioned into the outfield, has played some left field, has played some right field, really hasn't played a ton of center field. It's a guy that could possibly fall into that. Number one, I want you to be able to play the position well, but then also number two, you have to be able to hit. And G1 Bay does neither of those things. I would rather put Michael A. Taylor out there every single game because at least I know what I'm getting from him defensively, and I believe that 10 times out of 10, Michael Taylor makes that catch, and he probably makes that catch at his shoulder running in because he is reading the ball so well. G1 Bay gets turned around and makes a catch up against the wall that ends up looking like a very, acrobatic or, one of those like special type catches. But realistically, he got himself turned around and had to make the catch look that way because he doesn't know how to read the ball off the bat. And also, he's not hitting the ball very well at all either. And I don't really know how to explain this because he will not, benefit from being in AAA. And I know that, I might be like, I don't know, being a little bit contradictory here because I'm saying that, Henry Davis can't learn anything in AAA and he needs to stay in AAA. And for me, it's more about him. It's about confidence and, maybe putting a halt or at least a little bit of a pause on, the whole Henry Davis at catcher and just letting him focus on hitting and possibly becoming a DH, which is not really what you want from, your 1-1. But if that's what he turns out to be, then, kind of that's what he turns out to be. If he turns out to be a first baseman, a right fielder, but in the end, he still has to hit. But, G1 Bay in the minors at AAA in 2022 had a 792 OPS. In 2023 had a 993 OPS. This year, and this is like, these are not small sample sizes, except for, last year a little bit. But then this year, not a small sample size, 217 plate appearances, 943 OPS, 360, 437, 505, and 5 home runs. So, but then he comes up here last year, gets 371 plate appearances, slashes 231, 296, 311, 608 OPS, 67 OPS plus. I just really, I can't get this. And then before tonight's game, he had 41 plate appearances, 194, 268, 222, 491 OPS, and a 42 OPS plus. So that's kind of where my frustration lies tonight is that, yes, this lineup was lengthened a little bit. You do have, De La Cruz with his power. He has 18 home runs this season. You want to see a little bit more of that pop. You are going to get a ton of those strikeouts. You're going to get a guy that can't play the field all that well, but should provide you some power. You get Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, a guy who can play all over and can play, if not Gold Glove defense at multiple positions, pretty much near it. At least I would say, at third base and at second base, and doesn't play a bad shortstop. Can play first base in a pinch, can put him in the outfield in a pinch. He's just a guy that can play everywhere and is having one of his best offensive seasons. You have the revelation that is Joey Bart that is kind of extending that lineup a little bit when he's in there just because he has been hitting so well. But you are still left with way too many holes in this lineup. Brian Reynolds has a bad game. Who picks that up? Rowdy Tellez has a bad game. Who picks that up? Joey Bart has a bad game. Who picks that up? And I know that you're not going to have like a murderer's row of, just 1 through 9 of guys with an over 800 OPS, something that I believe the Atlanta Braves at some point in time during this last season, in 2023, did have that. But you do need to have a little bit more competency kind of at the plate and a little bit more of a guy that's just going to provide either pop and great defense or a guy that can provide on base and average and good defense in center field. The middle one, that one where you're having the guy who hits for pop and, plays good defense is very hard to find. But I don't know. That's just kind of where my mind is at right now. I mean, Brian Reynolds has been hitting great. Rowdy Tellez has been hitting great. Really, kind of carrying the team to a degree. But you don't have, I don't believe in this lineup, a hitter. And it's something that, we talked about like this entire offseason, is having a hitter that teams are afraid of and fear and that can turn the game around, with just one swing of the bat. And I guess for the Pirates, they may be envisioning that being O'Neal Cruz. And before people get like just irate and enraged about O'Neal Cruz not being in there against a righty tonight, he's a lefty, he should be in there, different stuff. I mean, it was mentioned during the broadcast that he was feeling some sort of sickness or feeling under the weather. So hopefully that's just what it is and he'll be back on the field. Even before that was mentioned, I looked at the Pirates are at the start of a 9-game stretch, and I know that there have been some rest days, but if you want O'Neal Cruz to get through the season and be as effective as possible, maybe sit him 2 days in a row so you don't have to sit him twice in the middle of this 9-game stretch, or risk injury by trying to play him through all of those 9 games. Not that I think that the Pirates would do that because they change the lineup so often. But, I mean, maybe you're hoping that O'Neal Cruz is that guy. But looking across, like, rosters in Major League Baseball, you're looking for that guy that just has, like, at this point in time in the year, 25 to 30 home runs, or is at least pushing towards that and can be counted on. And I'm looking more towards the 30 home runs. I know a lot of people were hoping that was going to be Jack Sawinski after he hit the 20 mid-20 home runs last year. For Brian Reynolds, I think that he is like a 25 home run guy, and that is extremely solid. But it's just not kind of like that, that big bopper in the middle of the lineup. So there's definitely some holes. Brian Hayes, I mean, I don't want to go on this rant, don't want to go on this tangent again, but the man has a bad back. And that, I believe, is the main reason why he hit so well last year. I don't even want to mention the man's name who got fired because, he fixed Brian Hayes. And it wasn't that, 1 month off. Because, I mean, as we saw towards the end of the season, he tore it up when he came back. And his numbers were starting to drop back down to earth a little bit over the next month after that. Because Brian Hayes has a bad back. And I'm not sure he can make it through an entire season. And I'm not sure that it's something that could be managed with just, random rest days. Because as we saw with Brian Reynolds, he's a guy that gets up out of his car and has back spasms and can't play the baseball game that day. So, I mean, and I know it's two different players, but it kind of seems like that it's the same sort of, just chronic back problem that you're not going to be able to predict. And he's tried to, I believe, fight through it more this year. Did sit down for a little bit, but did not, stay out as long as he did last year. And then has come back and hasn't been, the type of player that the Pirates expected. But when you have, somebody like him in that lineup, you have a Michael A. Taylor, aside from him becoming, God knows what down in Houston, but you have that in the lineup. You have Jared Triolo in the lineup. You have G1 Bay in the lineup. There's just way too many holes in this lineup to kind of contend with. And even when the team does hit, and we're coming up on like 30 minutes here, but we may go over a little bit because haven't even got into the bullpen yet. And the crazy thing to me here is that I was looking at some stats the other day, and by the other day, it was probably earlier today or the day before. But like I said, guys, I don't stay up after midnight very often, so I might be a little bit delirious. But I did look that since July 1st, the Pirates' offense is ranked 19th in Major League Baseball according to Fangraphs WRC+. They had an above average WRC+, a 102, since July 1st. We've seen the pitching staff, which was for the longest time ranked in the top 5 in Major League Baseball on Fangraphs, and since July 1st, actually the bullpen has been the 12th best bullpen in Major League Baseball. The starting rotation has been the 10th best, and then the pitching staff as a whole is sitting right around 11th. So that's the other thing, is that the pitching, hasn't been as great as it was, for at least the first few months of the season. And not that it's been bad, but it just hasn't been as consistent. Jared Jones being out for a while has a lot to do with that. Bailey Falter, being injured and then going on the IL, has a lot to do with that. But also just inconsistent performances from Martin Perez before he left. You don't know what to expect from Marco Gonzalez. Just because you don't know what to expect in his performance and how long he can go. And my dear God, can we not have to deal with bullpen fatigue, because we already are at this point in time, especially after, Mitch Keller having to have his game shortened due to, another rain delay that was longer than it should have been. Paul Skeens, and not anything against Paul Skeens, but you were probably expecting at least 6, if not, hoping for 7 innings from him, only getting, that 5 1/3 innings. Now you get a rain delay after 1.5 innings. You only get, 2 innings of Bailey Falter. Then you have another bullpen game where you have to use, Kyle Nicholas, who's a guy that, has been stretched out a little bit more at times during his career, so can maybe, handle the higher pitch count a little bit more, because the only other person that you may have in your bullpen that can do that isn't in your bullpen anymore, because that's Luis Ortiz, and he is now a starter. It's just getting tough here at the end of the season, and I know a lot of this is probably just frustration. We could go out and win the next 2, and then it's, right back at it. But, that's not something that, I'm expecting to happen at this point in time. If it does, obviously I will be jubilant. I will be absolutely excited. But just kind of riding the roller coaster and riding the waves of what has been a exciting Pirate season at times, and after games like tonight, extremely frustrating, depressing, and I don't know, just makes me tired, cranky, and angry, so I'm gonna go to bed.